back to Hearthstone Grandmasters here live from Taipei. Myself, Derek Brown, and Hunter Ace are ready to bring you the first game of Tom 60229 versus Staz to kick off our third day here at Grandmasters. Tom is going to be on the Bomb Warrior, very standard at this point. We've seen the power of this deck over all of Grandmasters and the Masters Tour event in Las Vegas. It's FroStee and Staz. I apologize. I was looking at the
I was just about to switch up the deck list.
I'm very sorry. There. Yeah, no. The justification is we have one deck list with FroStee, and we were.
Yeah, I got a bit confused there for a second.
Apologies there. This is the matchup that we're starting with. FroStee on the Hunter versus Staz on the Rogue. I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. Anyways, here we see the Hunter deck list. So FroStee with a pretty standard mid-range, I would say. He doesn't have anything too special, I think, compared to previous mid-rangers we had seen in the previous weeks. But we see that he clearly has some tech versus the Rogue matchup with the Rat Trap, for example. And also one deadly shot for the potential of Edwin van Cleef. Yeah,
I think we saw some pretty interesting play with FroStee, because if I remember, in his first game against Surrender, he actually mulliganed away the Rat Trap in one of his starting games, which I found pretty surprising. Clearly with a Vicious Scalehide in hand at the time, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. He was looking for the infamous combo against Rogue of Vicious Scalehide into Dire Frenzy in order to shuffle them into your deck and get a huge amount of healing against all the burn that Rogue can accrue over the course of the game. And outside of that, generally I find with the Hunter, the more aggressive early game plan doesn't work all too often because of all the little tricksy removal pieces that the Rogue has, like Backstab and SI7 Agent. So generally you're playing a little bit more of a control matchup to try and take it into the late game.
Yeah, try and take it in the late game and having your win condition of Suljin towards the end. And I believe that if Hunter manages to stabilize and get the Suljin out, in a very good position to win against the Rogue. And here we see the Rogue deck from Staz. Just a pretty standard Rogue deck. You see that he is preferring to go for the Sea Giant build, which we've seen that a lot of people have decided not to go for. And also he still has the Burgle package, which we've also seen some people decide not to go for in this tournament. So it's just very, very standard, I would say. And you think that the Sea Giants will reward him in the specific matchup, Dirk?
I was going to ask you the exact same thing.
Well, I asked you first.
As the father of Water Rogue, this deck is your baby with double Sea Giant in there. I mean, I think it's in kind of a weird spot against Hunter, because Hunter can obviously go very wide on the board with Unleash the Hounds, the Spring Paws as well. But I think generally with Hunter, when they're making their wide boards, they're trading them in, right? They're either rushing all the minions in with Spring Paw to kill off the board, or they're going Unleash the Hounds and trading off a big board.
Yeah, it's very situational, and sometimes it could be potentially very good if you have some small minions on the board and Hunter doesn't really want to push in for the combo turn yet, because they want you to extend more resources. And what the Hunter often runs into then is that then you have the big minion to make the board out of Unleash potential range, and that's pretty scary. But at the same time, it's not extremely powerful in the matchup, and sometimes it's a bit awkward and doesn't really get to see play.
Yes, and as you got to see there, FroStee and Staz, two players who come from pretty different backgrounds in Hearthstone, I think it's fair to say, with Staz getting through to Grandmasters in the money earner spot due to his win at WESG a few years ago, which was by far his biggest tournament victory to date, whereas FroStee on the other side, the lone Australian representative in Hearthstone Grandmasters, much to some players' chagrin, as a very high point earner.
Yes, very high point earner in the Asia-Pacific region. And here we're into game one, and Staz deciding to keep the SI7 agent. I didn't really get to catch FroStee's mulligan there, but
I mean, I think he held onto an animal companion, right? And like coin companion into companion, it seems pretty good way to start things off.
Yeah,
you just want to keep up on board.
Yeah, also just a solid one drop with the tracking, just checking for potential pressure, and he doesn't really want to play any one drops on one either, because Rogue just have the dagger that contests that very well. Yeah,
when you're on the coin, the one-drops get a lot worse to play on curve. As Hunter, you generally want to save them to go Timberwolf, Springpaw, some kind of a big removal turn, rather than just letting them die to the dagger.
Yeah, and if FroStee decides to go for this coin animal companion plan, Staz is a very efficient answer to that with the Backstab and the SI7 agent etiquette.
This is the dream versus animal companion. Basically, anyone that wasn't Huffer there, the Misha or the Leah, were very, very nice for Staz. And it does just mean now that with his keep of the SI7 agent, well, I mean, he drew the other one anyway, but it just allows him to very nicely keep up on board here, which was kind of risky because SI7 agent on the play rather than on the coin is by no means guaranteed to go off. It's pretty much only Backstab that can activate it unless you play a 2-drop and then shadow step it back the turn prior.
Yeah, correct. It's only backstep or that specific scenario that you talked about there. And he gets rewarded by picking up the backstep.
Big
so
time.
now Staz is ahead in the early game, which is super important for him, because if Staz manages to put on consistent pressure and get into this togwaggle on turn 6 or turn 7, he will be in a very good position, because Hunter doesn't really see their power turns before turn 10 and the potential of Suljin there.
Yeah, up until then it's basically a big pile of removal, which, you know, is pretty reasonable against this hand for Staz, because Staz does not have any real power plays quite yet. But I think the main thing for Staz that's going well so far is just denying the Dire Frenzy has been huge.
We see that Henchclown Burglar is giving Staz some interesting options there.
Pretty
he could
mediocre.
decide to go for the Zero Mana spells potentially to activate some combo potential, which I don't think was terrible or anything there, but he decides to go for the more consistent Shadow Bolt, which is very good at dealing with a lot of the Hunter minions.
To be honest, I didn't mind regenerate that much, because this matchup, you know, if you go very wide with the lackeys and the Sea Giant, which does often happen as the rogue, you can get into the situation where the Hunter just beats you down and goes for hero powers for lethal. But I think given that Staz is in such a dominant position in the early game, removal is more likely to be useful than the heal.
Yeah. And Staz is continuing to curve out. We see that he has... Ooh, this is...
Playing Token Druid now.
Well, all of these options are fairly...
Pretty good.
Fairly good, yeah, I would say. And
Sea Giant, Ancestral Spirit.
It's pretty interesting to see what Staz actually decides to go for. The Forest Aid could run into potential of Unleash combos later, which I think Staz is a bit afraid of. But
a little too slow, I think.
But it's also a lot of value. At the same time, you could also go for the Blessing of the Ancients to potentially push a small board to become way bigger. And there's also the consideration of the Ancestral Spirit, because that is just a 2-mana Death Rattle resummon a minion, which is just in general a very strong effect in this scenario.
I think I like the Ancestral Spirit the most, because like the thing with Blessing of Ancients is he doesn't actually have that much ability to make a board of small minions at the moment, and the main way he's going to do that is through lackeys. And when he has lackeys, he just wants to go for Togwaggle anyway. And so I think Ancestral Spirit is the most likely to get a sticky board to push consistent damage, so I like this choice.
Yeah, he decides to go for the faster choice, and the other cards he thought was too situational. So I like the pick by Staz there. I think that the other consideration was probably the Forest Aid, but if you're going for the Forest Aid game plan, a lot of the time you run into the Suljin from the Hunter, and he really wants to end the game before the Suljin.
I love Henchclown Burglar so much. I think it introduces such interesting decisions into your gameplay as rogue. Like it's less of a clown fiesta than some of the previous random generation cards.
Well, it feels from the rogue side, it feels very good. And
oh yeah,
you get to see a lot of decisions and a lot of choice, because there's a lot of very cool options you get. But from the other side, it's really just a clown fiesta, because the option could literally be anything.
I should justify, I say this as a rogue gamer, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the card. I really like to play with it, but it sucks sometimes to play against.
It does indeed.
But it's a very cool card. I really like the effect of it. It's very similar to Cabal Courier from the previous sets.
Oh, or the Dark Peddler. Good old days.
Discover in general is a very cool,
I just
cool
love
mechanic.
Discover.
Yeah. Also, like this card that FroStee just plays now with Mark Shot is one of the cards that just always feels good to play. You just swoosh a minion away, and then you get a random Discover.
Just swoosh him away.
Yeah. It's gone.
A lot of deadly shots being picked up on both sides, actually, with Staz getting one on the previous turn, and interestingly enough, opting to use the deadly shot. Oh, sorry, the blast, the Shadow Bolt, instead of the deadly shot there in order to clear off the wolf, which was not the most obvious decision, because as we've said, Hunter can go very wide on board, and therefore deadly shot can miss a lot of the time. So it's kind of an interesting decision, I think, to use the less situational card there.
Yeah, maybe it's afraid of potential of big hyena later in the game, but
it's possible.
It didn't seem in the current situation. I think that the deadly shot could be a bit awkward later, but it's also a pretty good card. So here we see again. I'm pretty sure they've always picked up Secret Plan in these matchups. It happens every time.
It's Secret Plan every single time, yeah.
And these secret options are always so close also, because there's so much consideration in whether or not to go for one secret to like represent a lot of secrets, and also just what is secret is the best secret.
I think I like Rat Trap the most. Like, because if you're ahead on board, the way that Hunter swings the game back is they have to play a combo of cards, right? They don't have one card like that just completely clears the board. That's not really in Hunter's arsenal. They have to use combinations of card like Unleash Timberwolf or Unleash plus the Hyena or something like that. And Rat Trap really shuts down a lot of those combinations.
And we see that Staz representing the perfect crushing walls positioning. So very, very smart by Staz there to play around rotating
a card that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And FroStee.
Terrible deadly shot positioning though for Staz there. He should have known that that was going straight down the middle.
Yeah. That was...
I mean, it was no less stupid of a thing to say than crushing walls positioning, so...
Yeah. Yeah, and I think FroStee there was planning on playing double deadly shot. But
because
now
he was expecting to miss.
Yeah, I was expecting to miss, but
he's like,
now that he
"Wait a
actually
second."
hit, he's reconsidering his thought process here
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what he wants to do. Because his hand right now is very low value, and well, without picking up Master's Call or Sultan for later turns now, it looks like he'll just run out of stuff, and Staz with a lot of cards in his hand is looking in a very prime position to just outgrind the Hunter.
Very, very easily. And, oh man, FroStee using this Vicious Scale Hide really doesn't feel good against Rogue when you are pretty much always, I find, trying to move towards Vicious Scale Hide Dire Frenzy. It's the combo to keep you in the game and make sure that none of their burn gets there. But given that he's already used one copy of Dire Frenzy, and like you said, his hand is very, very empty. He's kind of forced into this play. I can understand it, but that can't feel good for FroStee.
Will we see a tempo Togwaggle now, Derek?
The tempo tog.
The tempo Tog.
Well,
I don't see a lot of good options. He could also...
we could see Rat Trap, SI, and then even an Ancestral Spirit. Like, that's not bad on a 3-3, right?
Yes, it's not bad. It's not amazing either, but yeah, he probably wants to save the Togwaggle for later in case he does one of his 4 Lackey cards.
Right, it's 4 outs he's got, which is pretty good.
But it's very clean mana-wise to go for Togwaggle plus Ancestral Spirit here, and it's also
You're not incorrect.
a very sticky minute, but I can definitely see Staz going for the more clear play with the Rat Trap Ancestral Spirit and the SI7 agents. Maybe not even playing the Ancestral Spirit here, saving it for Sea Giant in the later turns.
I think I like just throwing it down. Like, I mean, a Sea Giant is a Sea Giant, right? The only way he can kill it off is with Deadly Shot. And if you have a wide board due to the fact that you played Ancestral Spirit, the Deadly Shot is less likely to hit the Sea Giant anyway. So in a way, it makes it less likely that your Sea Giant will die in the first place.
Yes. And FroStee here, not too much in his hand. Not too sure how he's going to handle this. It looks like he's just going to try to commit to the board here and respond as well as he can, and just hope that Staz doesn't have too much follow-up, and maybe he can draw the Soldier later.
Oh, it's just such a nightmare for him though, because
he even didn't pay respect to Freezing Trap at all there, attacking with Thunder Rhino. So
it's true.
Another pick from Staz, if he would have picked the Freezing Trap, the Thunder Rhino would have just got returned to FroStee's hand.
He wouldn't have been able to play it again either. Yeah.
Now Staz finally gets to play Sea Giant, 7 mana, 8/8. A lot of value there.
I mean, it's pretty good here.
It is pretty good. They're both playing a very slow game, and to be honest, they're not doing. Both are probably not doing a lot. And I think Staz will just continue and pushing here.
Yeah.
Pressure the potential that FroStee could have a Soldier in hand, and I think that is the thing that Staz is the most scared about. So he just tried to push for lethal in case of the Soldier.
And actually, yeah, Zul'jin is still pretty good for FroStee. I was going to say he hasn't played that many spells, but the 2 animal companions, the tracking,
the 2 deadly shots.
Yeah. It's good enough.
I feel like that's the only way that FroStee can get back in this game.
Well, Deadly Shot's worked out pretty well so far for FroStee this game, and it continues to do well for him.
Wrong Deadly Shot positioning again. Should have positioned on the other side, Derek.
Yeah, terrible play from Staz here.
Yeah, but is that
9?
One off lethal.
Damage off. Yeah.
1 damage off lethal. So now Staz has to consider what if FroStee Zul'jin?
Right, Zul'jin is the only consideration here for how he loses, I think.
How do we best play around the Zul'jin?
So if he goes double Life Drinker and pushes everything face, what could go wrong?
Zul'jin.
Right, well, I mean, sorry, when Zul'jin is played, what goes wrong for the... what is wrong with just going all in on the board?
Well, he plays 1 mark shot, 2 deadly shot. I don't think really we can beat Zul'jin, to be honest. Or I think that...
You think he can't beat Zul'jin?
Well, I think that we will fall behind after he plays the Zul'jin, but...
Fair enough.
But we have to make
He's got to just go all in, right?
Yeah, he has to go all in and try to pressure as much as possible. At least don't give him 2 turns on the Zul'jin. But if FroStee shows up with the Zul'jin here, I think that Staz could end up in a pretty bad position.
So I guess Life Drinker Deadly Shot then is reasonable because like killing off the wolf while still pushing the damage is even like pretty important to make sure you have a chance at beating the board. Yeah, I like this. I like this.
We also save a Life Drinker in hand in the case we top deck Shark or Shadow Step.
Yep.
For potential burn.
Well, it pretty much has to be Zul'jin now for FroStee for him to claw his way back into this game.
And it's not Zul'jin.
There it is. FroStee throws it down for Staz there. That really just felt like, well, I mean,
I don't
a reward for his mulligan, right? He kept the SI7 agent hoping to hit the backstab. He did hit the backstab and was left in a fantastic position because of that.
Yeah, and we see that the Hunter just fell out of resources. Didn't draw the Master's Call or the Zul'jin that game, and just versus what I would call a mediocre rogue hand without any lackeys. A Sea Giant that was stuck in the hand the entire game, a Togwaggle that was stuck in the hand the entire game. He just got there versus Hunter that didn't really show too much strength, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was really just the story of not finding Master's Call, right? Like that's the card you're looking for to refill your hand and draw through to all those beasts, because this is often the downside of playing Dire Frenzy, is it doesn't strictly make your deck better, because even though you're drawing a 1-mana 4/4 there, you don't want to draw that. You want to draw your card draw effects and Zul'jin, and that can kind of dilute your deck to the point where it's more difficult to draw through to those cards anyway. A bit of an unfortunate game for FroStee, even with his fortunate deadly shot rolls that he got along the way. That would have been over even quicker if he hadn't hit those.
Yes, for sure. And yeah, we will see if FroStee manages to claw back in the next game. He didn't get any of the card draw there, and also I felt like he had a lot of early aggression, but as said earlier, Staz managed to keep SI7 agent and pick up the backstab, so he kind of just got the early game just straight out of doing that keep. And first we were just playing from behind the entire game and didn't find the Zul'jin, so took a loss there.
He did indeed. And I believe for FroStee heading into his next game, taking a look at his secondary and tertiary deck, doesn't really feel like it's going to be getting any better for him, because I think he's got a pretty clear anti-mage and anti-warrior sideboard in his secondary and tertiary decks, as they both take out the, one takes out the Rat Trap, one takes out the Scale Height. It's really bad cards to lose against the
I do
rogue.
expect them both to play the same deck again, but we will see. We have seen some very cool decisions when it comes to the Game 2 and Game 3 earlier.
One way of putting it.
It's one way of putting it, yeah. In the earlier days, so maybe we'll see that some of them decides to swap it up a bit. I know that versus the Rogue sometimes, or versus the Hunter rather, sometimes you could go for a greedier sidebar, because Hunter often takes some type of control approach, but I'm not sure if this type of greed will do too much for him. But for example, a Mojo Master Zihi versus the Zul'jin could be a potential to shut.
Could actually be pretty good.
Yeah.
However, we did just get confirmation. They're both sticking primary. It makes sense. I think for Staz, like, because what happened for him that game that went so well, it wasn't even necessarily the value in the late game. Like, the Sea Giant was good, but I don't even think it was necessary for him to win the game. It was just mid-game tempo and the fact that FroStee kind of ran out of ways to even fight back.
He just kept on putting on pressure and generating value with the Burgle cards, and FroStee just had to stay reactive the entire game. And when he stays reactive and has to use his resources inefficiently and then doesn't get the Zul'jin towards the end, it just doesn't look very good for the Hunter.
It really does not. It kind of, I don't know, this is a really interesting part of Grandmasters, because I was going to say it begs the question from FroStee of bringing the Hunter in the first place, but I don't even want to berate him for that, because it's so difficult to predict what your two opponents are going to be bringing, and
he was unfortunate this week with getting both the rogues, and that is definitely not what the Hunter wants to see.
It is not indeed. I believe he held onto a Vicious Scale Hide there, which makes some amount of sense. Just being able to throw it down on turn 2 is not bad, and if he doesn't want to go for that, holding on for the combo of Scale Hide and Dire Frenzy is, again, super important.
Yeah, and at the other side, we see that Staz, again, keeping the backstab, to contest the potential of the early game animal companions from FroStee's side, and also keeps the Miscreant, which is a very good card, I've heard.
I mean, this hand looks pretty good for Staz, I have to be honest.
And we already see a decision here from FroStee. He has potential early game contest. And he decides to don't pick the Soldier. So now it's looking like FroStee has to take an aggressive approach in this game, and not looking good if he wants to take it slower, which is a decision that obviously is debatable because Soldier is a very good card, but I imagine that FroStee has played the matchup a lot, and he thinks that most of the time the game has to go aggressive for him to take a win.
So interesting, considering how last game Zul'jin... I mean, it's difficult, right? Because Zul'jin was like the only card that could save him at the end, but during the course of the game, if he had found other cards, maybe they would have been even better for him than Zul'jin would have been, and he wouldn't have needed Zul'jin if he'd had more aggressive options.
Yeah, he does have this rat trap now to...
yeah, that's big.
So yeah, that's very big. It locks down a lot of Rogue's potential to go totally crazy in the early game, or most of the time at least, unless Staz has his one-off sap, which could be very good to deal with the rat trap. That's also something that makes me more curious, I guess. Maybe he could have taken the Soldier, because with the rat trap, you kind of force Rogue to play a bit slower, unless they want to proc the rat trap.
True.
So. But I'm really not sure.
Well, did he have this? He didn't have the rat trap in hand right at the point when he made the tracking decision, because rat trap came off the top on turn 2.
Did it?
And he...
It didn't, did it?
Or was it on turn 3? Oh no, yeah, sorry, you're correct. Okay.
I think it was. I think it might be true.
Yeah,
yeah, that might be true. So, and here's another decision here from FroStee's position. Does he want the potential of Dire Frenzy together with Scale High, or does he want to play into the Timberwolf plus Unleash? Now that he doesn't have the Soldier anymore, how does this change up the play, you think?
I mean, I know that I am a player and who consistently underrates Unleash the Hounds. Like, a lot of players are keeping this. We saw Bunny Hopper keeping it against the Mage.
We also do know that FroStee currently has the rat trap available, which makes it less likely for Staz to go extremely wide on the board in one turn. So it might be that Staz will try to just keep pressure going with just one minion a turn, and versus that, the Dire Frenzy might be better.
It stalls out the game, right? It just takes things slower. It gives FroStee the chance to find his...
But Staz is about to do potentially a very scary play for FroStee. If he plays the Tempo Shark here, potential of the next turn with the Lackey, backstab, Edwin
sounds pretty good to me.
Very good. And FroStee only running one Deadly Shot in his deck. This Shark is almost guaranteed to be uncontested, and also the upcoming Edwin the turn afterwards will also almost guaranteed to be uncontested.
I guess the problem would then just be that Rat Trap is very difficult to answer with the lackeys that he has available. Oh. How's that for a 4-drop? Pretty good?
Yeah, I would have. That's pretty good for the I would have personally liked to see the Shark there.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that the route Staz is taking here is pretty reasonable, with committing to not developing into the Rat Trap. But
do you think that Edwin would be so powerful that Rat Trap doesn't even matter?
It would be really big.
Yeah. However, if you know you're going to roll Houndmaster Shaw.
Yeah, knowing you would roll Houndmaster Shaw, I believe this play was very strong. But yeah, it might have been I would have personally leaned towards the Spirit of the Shark there and play into the Rat Trap. But I understand why he's going for this, because if you go for the Spirit of the Shark and then go wide on the board a turn afterwards, it might be that your opponent gets such a powerful Unleash turn with the Timberwolf together with the Rat Trap minion, and that is very scary.
Houndmaster Shaw just showing how threatening it is, though, when you are fighting for these, just basically fighting for board control. In any matchup, you have to be killing it off, or the rush and the value trade that Staz will be afforded, I think, would just be way too much for FroStee to fight against.
Yeah, and now Staz is...
Rat Trap can be dealt with super easily now.
Yeah, Rat Trap could be dealt with super easily now, and a potential player would be Spirit of the Shark together with a Lackey, and then go for Backstab on the Timberwolf, and then Backstab Vendetta, the other pick. But he decides to hold on to it a bit. He doesn't feel like he needs to proc the Rat Trap this turn. He could just wait another turn with it. A position that Staz has kind of left himself into now, because he wasn't willing to fast play it more.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that he's just kind of committing into playing 2 cards a turn, and that is kind of the trap that FroStee put him in with picking the Dire Frenzy and everything. And if he just keeps on doing under average turn, like turns that are just worse than what he could have potentially done, it might be that FroStee manages to stabilize, and that could be scary for Staz.
And I think for I don't know, it's close, because for Staz, like, by going for the double backstab play, he's obviously using 2 backstabs, which is a pretty good card in the matchup to fight back against a lot of the beasts that are just developing against your board, to kind of make the board tension go more favorably for you. But I see your point. I think eventually he has to just start pushing the minions onto the board to actually try and close out the game before Zul'jin, because obviously Staz does not know that Zul'jin is gone. And
I imagine that Staz next turn, if FroStee tries to contest the board, will pull the trigger on kill, because he has a very efficient way to kill the rat trap now. So the rat trap shouldn't be a problem. And if Staz will continue to make his turns weaker by playing around the rat trap, I feel it feels a bit bad. And again, Staz is left with a pretty not very strong hand together with the shark. He has no real interaction with it.
Pretty interesting trade, though, there from FroStee, right? To kill off the 1/1 rather than the Edwin.
Yeah, and also a big problem for Staz here is that it's not that easy for him to proc the rat trap. And he really wants to proc it because he has a very efficient way of killing it now. So, what can he even do?
So if we was to see Waggle pick this, even then the 0 mana cards, you don't want to you don't want to use them up unless he's looking at a self backstab, which sounds pretty awful.
A self backstab.
I mean, it's kind of something to consider, even if it's pretty bad. Like, maybe he just doesn't need to go for it this time. We could just see Fan of Knives Eviscerate, right, and then
but
pushing damage face.
Again, we're that is a very low pressure play, and we're continuously just not doing anything that strong. We could, but then like if we play the Timberwolf, the Vendetta doesn't cost enough anymore. I mean, it costs 0 mana, which is very important. He's expending both his Waggle Pick and his Eviscerate into killing the Scale, which is a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But
so is this better than just using the Fan of Knives, though? Because it doesn't draw you an extra card, which is pretty important. Like, this hand really wants more cards.
It might be that he wants to set up a potential bounce for the next turn.
That's fair.
If he could manage to bounce the Edwin with Shark still on the board, that would be very strong. But I imagine that being fairly unlikely. But I think that it's very likely that the Edwin is still on the board the upcoming turn, because FroStee might prioritize killing the Shark over the Edwin.
Fair enough.
With FroStee's current hand, he could, if he wants to, kill both of them. And that might be a very reasonable play with the current information he has had, considering Staz's previous turns. I think that FroStee might also just leave up the Shark, which is extremely scary. But I think that that Staz's turn with Waggle Pick plus Eviscerate was very mediocre, and he shouldn't really have a Battle Cry in the hand at least. But there's a lot of Battle Cries in the deck, so killing the Shark is still pretty good.
Staz, FroStee finding himself another deadly shot this game. They've been working out pretty well from this time. And let's see. Wow, he hits it again.
Oh, and he draws the Miscreant, which he wanted to draw last turn. Also, interestingly enough, if he went for the Fan of Knives last turn, he would have picked up the Miscreant together with the Shark.
Exactly, I knew that. I knew
that would have been very good, because then he could have went Fan of Knives into the Vendetta into the Miscreant.
Yes.
It would have been very, very good.
But it's still pretty good, right? You could even bounce back the Miscreant on this turn.
Well, yeah, and then
he
he's
he wouldn't have to play it again.
Finally proccing the Rat Trap.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good point. Maybe he wants to proc up this turn just to swing the board with the Rat Trap.
But Staz's approach to this game has been incredibly slow. And this Kill Command card that FroStee decided to pick from the tracking early in the game could have been a Soldier, which might end up mattering towards the end there. We will see.
I think it will definitely end up mattering.
We'll see how it turns out. Yeah.
Especially as he already had an Unleash the Beast in hand. Dozing Marksman. Really sad to be finding that. I guess with the Goblin Lackey you can activate it relatively easily. But again, it's just another slow card, which from where Staz is sat, he is definitely hoping to just not see a Zul'jin. With his line of play, it's very clearly not playing around Zul'jin, which, as we know, is going to work out pretty well for him.
Yeah, there is no Zul'jin left in FroStee's deck, so it's going to work out pretty well for him. He's just slow playing it, which is very good in the current situation. Picking up Misha there for FroStee is actually super efficient, because the 0-4 2-drop is just
bad.
Yeah, very bad in this situation at least. And Stas' C-Gen just keep on being very hard for him to get out. He hasn't really gotten any of the lackey generators early in the game, so he didn't really spread too wide on the board, and therefore the C-Gen just never really got into play.
Dude,
but FroStee having used his one of daily shot, I believe, or was that generated?
That was generated.
Yeah, FroStee having used one daily shot doesn't have too many efficient ways of getting killing the Sea Giant. So if Staz ever manages to go wide on the board now and get the Sea Giant out together with it, it might be very hard for FroStee wide with no Zul'jin to contest that.
And I think FroStee there was really, really, really unsure as to whether he should point that Misha face or trade off the Dozing Marksman. Like, the punishes that he was trying to run through in his head is like backstab or self-Kobold Lackey on the Dozing Marksman, which then trades. Like, he could have upped his cards into more damage by using them on his own Dozing Marksman there. So it's a sad trade that he goes for there, but I think considering how many punishes there were for going face, I can understand his reasoning.
So he could potentially Cable Rat, then rush the Cable Rat, and then Timberwolf to make a Cable Rat free attack.
Wow. I mean, it's not that bad.
He can rush it again to make it 4 attack.
Or he could rush the Blink Fox
to make that
5 attack. Which holds no bearing whatsoever on the breakpoints here.
But for the next turn, first you won't expect these beasts to get additionally buffed.
You're not wrong, Casper. You're not wrong.
That's all that matters. Not being wrong.
It's largely completely irrelevant, but you're not wrong. I mean, to be fair, the extra 2 attack that Timberwolf does afford will not be that bad.
Yeah, and FroStee here kind of struggling versus the wide board. He used the Unleash earlier in the game. Did he use the Unleash earlier in the game? Maybe he didn't use the Unleash earlier in the game.
He did to kill off the Houndmaster Shaw.
Yes, he did to kill off the Houndmaster Shaw. And he doesn't really have too much wide board removal comeback besides the Unleashed Hounds and the Zul'jin. So he's looking in a pretty bad position if he doesn't manage to kill off anything here, and then with the Sea Giants will most likely come out.
Woof. Vicious Scalehide and both Dire Frenzies that were left in his deck as the options here. Like, given that he's already discovered a Dire Frenzy and used it on the Vicious Scalehide, it's probably Scalehide that he picks at this point, because shuffling extra cards into the deck isn't even good for FroStee at this point. He just wants to make sure he finds Master's Call as quick as he humanly can.
Yeah, I imagine he picks Scala here, and we'll play that together with the Unleash the Beast. And Staz will probably get a very strong turn the upcoming turn with playing a bunch of minions together with the Sea Giants. And that will be extremely hard for FroStee to deal with.
He even gets an absolutely insane Cybertech chip as well. Like, this could add 7 mechs to his hand. Like, it's pretty nutty.
He doesn't want to take advantage of the Kale Rep being a beast and Timberwolfing it, which is
reasonable, but
I
disappointing.
Guess. Disappointing. Exactly. That is disappointing. He gets a mech that could potentially synergize with the new mechs he will get from the Cybertech chip.
I love how the actual important stuff in this game, unmentioned, but the beast and the mech synergy, that's what really
what is important in this game
interest.
Yeah, what is important in this game that FroStee might look back on now that might matter quite a lot. Oof. That Zul'jin that was not picked turn 2 or 1 in the game,
I think it was turn 1, right?
Turn 1 in the game was this kill command that he preferred. And we're currently at turn 10, and the Zul'jin would do a lot of stuff. And he might regret it now.
Staz here with 1 space left on the board could have gone for a 1-drop, which would have left him with 1 more mana after this, I believe, right, when he's playing 2 Sea Giants. And therefore he could have played the Cybertech chip as well.
Yeah, I think Staz is just hedging towards the...
Yeah.
Hedging towards the Unleash the Hounds.
I guess that's the only way he pulls this one back. And FroStee, realizing that with the 2 Sea Giants, throws it down, shrugs at the camera. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Yeah, he might look back at it though. The turn 1 pick, kill command, never got played. And that could have been a Soulgen. And as far as I know, the Soulgen would have, if not dealt with the board, dealt with quite a lot of the board. And put on counter pressure and generated new cards. So we might have seen a different outcome to the game if he ended up picking the Soulgen there. But Staz taking a very important victory for him. And I believe going up to a 4-6 score now. Which
yes, I believe
is still a potential for qualifying, but he has to continue performing if he wants to qualify now. And we also see that the consistency of the week with Rogue beating Hunter just keeps going. And I'm not even sure if Hunter has won again this week.
I think it's now 0-3 with the 2 games from the mid-range Hunter that we've seen from FroStee and the 1 Mech Hunter game from Chonsu. It really has not been looking all too strong so far, but for Staz, he's been looking very strong this week. Well, actually, Staz is the player who's beaten 2 of those Hunters with his Rogue so far, having lined up against Chonsu and FroStee so far. So his Rogue was looking like a pretty fantastic bring this week. And I've got to be honest, his gameplay there, I think it was maybe a tiny bit slow in that second game, but overall, it just looked like some very solid Rogue play.
Yeah, it was just keeping the pressure going consistently and just creating a hard time for FroStee. Without the Soulgen there was just no way he was getting back in the game. He was just didn't have too much power level in his cards, and that is some of the weakness to the Hunter compared to some of these other classes these days.
Yep.
Hunter just doesn't seem to have the clear power cards besides the Soulgen, and that is really showing weakness versus the clear power decks of Rogue there.
Yeah, we're seeing the power level of Rogue, and we're also seeing the power level of Staz, who we have on the line. Can you hear me, mate?
Yes.
Brilliant. Very well done. A 2-0 week so far now in Grandmasters. Things are starting to turn around for you now, getting some victories. How are you feeling at this point in Grandmasters?
Of course, it feels great. This is the first time I won twice in a week, so it feels great.
Yeah, we can see that. It's looking very, very strong for you. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that your Rogue lined up very, very well from your opponents. Were you expecting both of your opponents to win, to bring Hunter this week, and this was a kind of counter to that? Or was it just a little bit fortunate that they ended up bringing 2 classes that are pretty weak to you?
I didn't really expect Hunter. I think just Rogue is good in general. I don't think I didn't expect people to bring Warrior, so I just went for Rogue. And Rogue is like almost 50-50 plus some good matchups against all other top tier decks, I think.
Yeah, I think we can agree with that. We've been seeing a lot of Mage versus Rogue in particular, and the Rogue's doing reasonably well, and we've got a little bit more of that to come today. One thing I want to ask you, while we have the creator of the Sea Giant on the casting desk here, what inspired you to bring the Sea Giant version? Like, what matchups were you hoping to improve with that tech inclusion?
Actually, it is for the mirror matchup. I was expecting. I was thinking that it might be possible that the other players are thinking the same and just go for Rogue. So Rogue just tends to go wide. And I think Sea Giant is really good in mirror matchup.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Because we see that in general in APAC this week, there was a lot of Rogues. So
yes.
It was just more likely it would hit a Rogue if it was in an entire field. But facing up against the 2 Hunters and also the Mech Hunter, I think that the Sea Giant was just kind of turning out pretty well in those games too. And we see that versus the mid-range Hunter here even, just having a big minion just turned out super well for Staz.
It did indeed.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, mate. You have our World Champions seal of approval on your decks this week. And very well done on your 2-0 scoreline. I wish you the best of luck in coming weeks.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Really glad to see Staz turning his record round in Grandmasters. I think he's a player who is definitely going to be struggling with the fact, with his reputation overall, that he had one massive victory, obviously, in his WESG performance a couple years ago, and has struggled to follow up with that. We see that from quite a lot of players who have one big tournament victory and maybe struggle to follow up on that afterwards.
Why are you looking at me?
No reason. No reason at all.
Yeah, anyways, we will see if this consistency of top performers getting a bit weaker with the years following up. But I think that Staz and other players will try to show that they have consistency and will prove themselves in multiple tournaments, Derek.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a cool series. We see that the Rogue again takes the victory versus Hunter, and I think that the Rogue in general has been a pretty good performer this week. It's just versus the Mage match that have been close, but we see that Mage currently 3-1.
Yep.
That might change today, and we will see that matchup later today, I believe. So we'll see. Who is coming up next now?
Up next, for our next match of the day, we have Tom60229, who I erroneously thought was our first match of the day, up against Chonsu at a pretty poor record now in Grandmasters, hoping to get his first win with that Mech Hunter. And up against the Bomb Warrior, I think this is the matchup he was hoping to have a pretty good shot in, with all that Mech synergy counteracting Warrior's removal. We're going to see if he can get it done after a short break.